The following case file is a fictional crime story crafted for entertainment. Characters, locations, and events are imagined and not connected to any real individuals or incidents. This narrative includes mature themes involving crime and investigation. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Nothing shown or described should be interpreted as encouragement or instruction for illegal activity.
The rain had a way of making Ravenwood feel smaller than it was, as if the entire city folded in on itself every time the clouds opened. Detective Mara Hale stepped out of her unmarked sedan and pulled her coat tighter, letting the cold mist settle on her cheeks. Ravenwood was a big enough city to swallow secrets, but small enough to make sure everyone eventually ran into their past. Today, Mara felt hers closing in. The call had come in early. Too early for something routine. Lieutenant Briggs didn't usually ring her before sunrise unless something required her particular kind of thinking. "Ellison," he had said, his voice rough from coffee and irritation. "You need to come to the precinct. Someone left something for you." "Someone?" she asked, already dreading the tone he had used. "Yeah. And you're not going to like it." Now, as she walked through the precinct lobby with water dripping from her coat, she felt eyes follow her. That wasn't new. Mara had a certain presence, tight posture, sharp gaze, and a reputation for not letting cases die quietly. Some admired it, some avoided her because of it. Either way, she didn't care. She was here to work. Briggs was waiting in the hallway outside her unit, arms crossed, a manila envelope in his hand. "Morning," he grunted. "That's debatable. What is that?" He held it out to her. "It was dropped off overnight. No return address. Reception found it." Mara took the envelope, feeling an uncomfortable weight inside. Papers, maybe a small object. Her name was handwritten on the front in black ink, the letters deliberate, almost careful. Who dropped it off? No cameras picked up a face. Person kept their head down, hoodie up, walked right up to the desk, left it, walked out. Mara opened the envelope. Inside was a single letter, folded once, and a key. Her fingers tightened around the paper before she unfolded it. The handwriting was the same as on the envelope. "Detective Ellison, you don't know me, but 22 years ago you convicted the wrong man. I have proof. Meet me at the address on the key's tag. Midnight. Come alone. The last witness." Mara felt her breath hitch. Not because of the accusation, but because she recognized the case immediately. "Briggs," she murmured. He read her expression. "It's that case, isn't it?" She nodded slowly. "The Collins case." The name hung in the hallway like a cold draft. The Collins case had been one of Ravenwood's biggest convictions. A young man named Nathaniel Price had been sentenced for the brutal killing of Rebecca Collins, a university student. Mara had been a rookie then, assisting senior detectives. It was the case that had shaped her, her first taste of how justice could be won or lost on the strength of witnesses and the weakness of evidence. Price had maintained his innocence from day one, and Mara had always felt uneasy about the final moments of that trial. Something about the star witness, a man named Thomas Keene, had bothered her. Nervous, sweaty, too eager to please. But the department wanted a win. The city wanted closure, and she hadn't been in a position to challenge the momentum of the case. Now, somebody was calling her out on it. Briggs exhaled. "You're not thinking of going." "I am. You can't go alone to some mystery location because an anonymous letter told you to. If they have evidence, I need to see it." "Mara," she cut him off. "Briggs, if there's even a chance Nathaniel Price was innocent..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Briggs swore under his breath. "Fine. But you're not going without backup. They won't talk if I bring anyone. And what if you're walking into a setup?" Mara pocketed the key, folded the letter, and slid it back into the envelope. "Then I'll deal with it." Briggs shook his head. "You're too much like your old partner." Mara froze. Her old partner, Detective Adrian Shaw, had died 5 years earlier, shot during a raid. Briggs rarely mentioned him. Doing so now was his way of saying he was worried. She forced a thin smile. "Shaw taught me to follow the truth wherever it leads." Yeah, and look where it led him. Now, as she walked through the precinct lobby with water dripping from her coat, she felt eyes follow her. That wasn't new. Mara had a certain presence. Tight posture, sharp gaze, and a reputation for not letting cases die quietly. Some admired it, some avoided her because of it. Either way, She didn't care. She was here to work. Mara had sat at her desk, turning the key over in her hand. The tag attached to it read, Locker 314, Ravenwood Central Station. Not a building. An abandoned subway station beneath the old industrial district. The city had shut it down 15 years ago after a structural collapse threatened to take the whole line with it. It was dark, empty, unused, which meant no cameras, no witnesses, no help if something went wrong. She wasn't going to wait until midnight to at least scout the area, but first, she needed to refresh the details of the Collins case, something she hadn't revisited in years. She pulled the case file from archives. The folder was dusty, the paper inside yellowed at the edges. Rebecca Collins, 19, bright student. Killed in her apartment. Forced entry, signs of struggle. The evidence had been circumstantial. A footprint, fiber matches, and a witness who claimed to have seen Price leaving the building. Thomas Keene. Mara stared at his witness statement. Keene had said he lived across the street and had been stepping out to smoke when he saw the suspect flee. He provided details that matched what the police wanted to hear, but something always felt off. Witnesses rarely remembered such specific details unless they were rehearsed. She flipped through photos. Rebecca smiling with friends. Rebecca studying. Rebecca lying on the floor of her apartment. Blood pooled around her hair. 22 years hadn't softened the impact of those images. She closed the file with a sharp exhale. If somebody was calling themselves the last witness, that meant one of three things. 1, they saw something back then. 2, they knew something about Keene. Or 3, they were involved. Mara left the precinct with the envelope sealed in her coat pocket and the weight of old regret pressing on her shoulders. Ravenwood Central Station stood like a forgotten skeleton in the city's underbelly. The upper levels were boarded up, but the underground tunnel entrances remained accessible through various abandoned maintenance routes. Mara knew the city well enough to find her way in. With a flashlight in one hand and her other resting near her holstered weapon, she pushed through the rusted gate and descended the stairs. The air was damp, tinged with mold and something metallic, iron or rust. Her footsteps echoed in the emptiness. Locker 314 was halfway down the corridor. Before she opened it, she listened. Nothing but the distant drip of water. No footsteps, no breathing, no movement. She inserted the key. The locker clicked open. Inside was a single object, a cassette tape. Old, dusty, a date written on the label, June 12th, 2003, the night of the murder. Mara felt her pulse quicken. If this was real, if somebody had recorded something the night Rebecca died, she took the tape and closed the locker. As she turned, she caught a faint sound, a soft scrape behind her. Someone was here. Her flashlight swung up. Ravenwood PD, show yourself. Silence. Then footsteps. Fast. Retreating. Mara sprinted after the sound, her boots splashing through puddles as she moved. Down the dark platform, the silhouette darted into a maintenance tunnel. Stop! She shouted. The figure didn't stop. Mara chased, her breath sharp, her adrenaline rising. The tunnel curved left, and when she rounded the corner, the figure was gone. Not vanished, too smart for that, but hidden in the darkness. She listened, waiting for a breath or a scuffle. A faint metallic clink echoed from above. She looked up. A maintenance ladder. Whoever it was had climbed out through one of the old access hatches. By the time she reached it, the hatch was swinging closed. She shoved it open and emerged into a narrow alley behind an abandoned textile warehouse. The rain had started again. Heavier now, masking any sound of footsteps. The street beyond was empty. Whoever that had been there didn't want her dead. They wanted her warned. She hurried back to her car and drove straight to her apartment, where she still kept an old cassette player she used for evidence reviews. She sat on her couch, turned on a dim lamp, and inserted the tape. Static, then voices. A man, frantic. A woman, crying.
A woman. Crying. Mara leaned forward. Man, you don't understand. I didn't want to do this. Woman. Please, just let me go. Her stomach twisted. It was Rebecca Collins. Man, you saw something you shouldn't have. You know that, right? Woman. I won't say anything. I swear. A smack. A cry. Mara clenched her jaw, and then she froze again. Man, you think I believe that?
After what you did? After what you did? That didn't match the prosecution's narrative at all. Rebecca had been portrayed as a random victim, not someone involved in anything. The struggle on the tape grew louder, the man's breathing heavy, the woman's sobbing muffled. Then a final scream, the tape cut out. Mara sat motionless. The voice was not Nathaniel Price. She replayed the voice again. No doubt. Different tone, different cadence, different pitch. Nathaniel Price hadn't killed Rebecca Collins. Someone else had. Someone who had just resurfaced. She turned off the tape and sat in silence, the rain tapping against her window. Questions flooded her mind faster than she could process them. Who recorded the tape? Why now, after 22 years? And who was the man in the recording? As she stared at the envelope, the letter's words repeated in her mind. You convicted the wrong man. If the tape was real, this was the most important evidence she'd ever seen, something that could overturn a life sentence. But the man on the tape, she had heard that voice before, somewhere in the darkest corners of her memory. Detective Mara Ellison suddenly felt cold because the voice belonged to someone who should never have been near that apartment, someone she hadn't thought about in years, someone the police department trusted. She whispered the name aloud, barely believing it. Thomas Keene.
Mara said the name into the quiet room like a warning, and the word echoed against the walls of her apartment. Thomas Keene, the man who had given the testimony that sent Nathaniel Price to prison, the man who had been nervous, eager, and impossibly specific at the trial, the man who had smiled and shaken hands with the chief afterward, who had been photographed in the papers as a citizen who helped bring a killer to justice. She should have been surprised the voice belonged to Keene. She should have been angry. Instead, she felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the rain outside. Keene's face flashed in her memory, pale, narrow, a little too clean-cut for the part he had played in the neighborhood. If Keene had been the man on the tape, it suggested one ugly possibility. Either Keene had lied on the stand, or he had lied to the recording, or he had lied to himself. None of those options were comforting. Mara called Briggs the moment she pulled the cassette out of the player. He answered on the second ring, voice still rough. You okay? You sound... I'm at my place, she said. I found a tape. It's Rebecca's voice and a man's voice. He admits to being there. There was a pause long enough to read the weather outside. You sure? Yes. Mara could still hear the end of the tape in her head. The faint final scream, then the cut. Briggs, the voice? You don't have to say it. I think it's Thomas Keene. Another pause. Ellison, Keene's dead. He died 5 years ago. Heart attack. You remember that? He was on his porch, collapsed. Everyone at the department... No, Mara said. I remember him at the trial, but I don't remember him dying. Are you sure? Yeah. That old guy whose testimony sealed the deal, Keene, he's gone. Mara's mind scrabbled for a place to put that fact, like a shoe that no longer fit. If Keene was dead, how could his voice be on the tape? Unless the tape was older than rumored. Unless someone had copied it. Unless someone had a recording of Keene that they would held until now. Where was he when he died? Left his small house up in Northwood. Alone, heart condition, died in his chair, had a funeral the city paid for. No fuss. Find me the file. All mentions of Keene. Birth certificate, obit, anything. Why now? Briggs asked. Who's sending this stuff to you? I don't know, Mary admitted, but someone with access to old files knows Keene's voice. Someone who can find a tape from 22 years ago and drop it in a locker beneath the central station. Someone who wants the Collins case opened. All right, I'll pull whatever I can. But Mara, be careful. If someone's leaking this stuff, they might be looking for trouble. She hung up and sat with her coffee gone cold. The idea that Keene was anyway involved cut at a different sore. Keene had always been the pivot that made the Collins case feel wrong. The star witness had delivered the details that fit like a glove around the evidence. Why would Keene lie? Witnesses lie all the time, out of fear, out of loyalty, out of revenge. But Keene had seemed eager to be part of the closure, not orchestrating it. He seemed like a man who wanted things fixed so he could sleep. Mara's phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Do not go after this alone. She stared at it for a long time. No name, no signature. The irony of anonymous warnings made her laugh once, brief and brittle. Whoever had left the tape and the key knew she would want to go alone. They had banked on her temperament. They also knew she was likely to be reckless. That had been the point all along. She spent the rest of the morning at the archives with Briggs,
who had the kind of patience built from decades of civil servants and coffee. He unearthed trial transcripts, photographs, police memos, and a folder stamped Keene. There were photographs of Thomas Keene at the stand, photographs of his apartment showing stacks of books and yellowing newspapers, a medical note about hypertension. There was also a single handwritten letter from Keene to the DA, undated in the paper file, but referenced in a marginal note, where Keene asked for protection after receiving threats. The note said nothing about involvement in the murder. It spoke of fear, of being followed, of seeing a figure on the street. The department had filed it and moved on. Mara copied everything. She needed to compare Keene's mannerisms on file to the voice on the tape. Voices were slippery. People disguise them, age them, change them. But certain cadences, patterns of speech, vowels, and grotesque laughter leaked through. She had to hear the tape again, not in the static atmosphere of her apartment, but in a place where she could slow it down, listen for artifacts, for breath, for words muffled by a struggle. She drove to the old forensics office that had been converted into a cold case review room. It smelled of ozone and stale paper. A young tech named Imani greeted her with a look that said she had been expecting a mess more complicated than coffee. "You got the tape?" Imani asked without preamble. "Yes." Mara placed it on the counter like a sacrament. Imani fed the cassette into a player that hummed with old electronics. She ran the audio into a digital analyzer and slowed it to 30% speed, isolating frequencies, amplifying certain ranges. "We can clean this up. If it's Keene, we'll hear him." They listened. The muffled cry of Rebecca, a grunt, then the man's voice, not Nathaniel Price, but someone with the clipped consonant, the way they bit their T's as if to soften them. A phrase that stuck like a splinter. "You think I'd forget?" A cadence that felt too polished for a corner of the street witness, more like someone who practiced what to say when the department came around. Imani rubbed her chin. This may not be Keene. Could be a mimic, could be a tape spliced together, or someone kept an extra copy from the original recording. Imani frowned. Who records a crime scene like that? Mara thought of surveillance cameras, of neighbors, of amateurs with dictaphones. It was rare, but not unheard of. Who knows what thread she pulled would unravel into other people's benches. She played the segment again, this time isolating a background noise that had been buried beneath the voices. A metal hinge creaking. The sound had an odd rhythm, like a gate opening and closing. Warehouse, Imani guessed. Mara's mind flicked to the industrial district and the closed textile warehouses. Locker 314 had been behind one of them. The tape was probably recorded somewhere nearby. Someone with proximity. She left the forensic lab with a new list of places to check. Keene's old address, the site of the Collins murder, the housing project where Nathaniel Price had lived, and quietly, Knox and Harlow, the internal affairs office. That one she didn't mention. She only thought it because authority sometimes lies in the same room as the rock. Her first stop was Nathaniel Price's prison file. She sat in a visitor's room 2 hours later, the fluorescent lights making everything feel like it belonged to another reality. Price was taller than she remembered from the trial, older now, his hair grown long and threaded with gray. His eyes were heavy with time, but when they focused on her, something like relief crossed his face. "Mara," he said. He still called me by name, the way convicts called constables on those rare occasions when they trusted them. "I didn't think anyone would come." "You asked for me," Mara said, sliding a photocopy of the cassette label across the table. "Did you record anything that night, Nathaniel?" He looked down, his hands. He flexed them, old scars visible. "I never saw her." "You maintained that from day one." "Because it's true. I didn't leave. Mara stated him, the square of scar tissue on his knuckles, the way his shoulders stiffened. "Nathaniel, someone sent me a tape. It's Rebecca's voice and a man's voice. The voice doesn't sound like you." He watched for a long time. "Someone wants me to stay where I am," he said finally. "Someone's keeping me here. If they have a tape, it doesn't prove anything by itself. People can find old fragments, splice them together. But if it's real, if the voice proves I didn't do it, then the people who put me away will have to answer for that." "Who do you think did it?" Mara asked. He shrugged. "I don't know. I was a nobody. Rebecca. She had things about her. I didn't know what they were then. I was just in the wrong place." She kept watch as if the walls had ears. "Who did you see that night? Anyone unusual in your building?" "No." Price's voice turned small. "If I seen someone, they'd have known me. I wouldn't be here." She left the prison feeling the gravity of his words. He insisted he was innocent.
That didn't make him honest. It made him human. She believed him more than she had as a rookie, mostly because years in the department had taught her the look of someone crushed by being forgotten. But she also knew convict honesty was fragile. People lied to survive. The tape was the first real piece of evidence that contradicted the prosecution's narrative. Her next visit was to Keene's old house in Northwood. The property had been auctioned off, and now a young couple lived there, cheerful and oblivious to the investigation that had once threaded through the previous owner's life. The new owner, a man named Alex Rios, answered Mara's knock with the look of startled hospitality. Mara showed her badge without dramatics. "We're reopening a case. This used to belong to Thomas Keene." His eyes went soft with a practiced sadness. Yeah, he was an odd man. He kept to himself. Left a lot of books. We found some old tapes in a box when we cleaned the attic. Kept thinking they were radio bits, you know? We tossed half. We kept one. Didn't realize. Did you find anything else? Notes, letters? Rios led me in through the house. It smelled like lemon and old paper. The attic was a cave of cardboard boxes and stacks of National Geographics. In a faded shoebox, Mara found more cassette tapes, yellowed and brittle. Dates scribbled on the labels in shaky handwriting. May 2003. June 2003, August 2003. Her heart stuttered.
The labels matched the period she needed. "Can I take these?" she asked. Rios hesitated. "They're junk. I don't know if I should." "You can hand them to Briggs. He'll log it." He handed them over with the casual indifference of someone who thought he was helping a cold case become another kind of archive. Mara slid the tapes into an evidence bag and sealed them with practiced hands. She left feeling lighter and heavier at once. If Keene had kept tapes, why? Was he recording to remember, to protect himself, or to hide something? Back at the precinct, Briggs frowned at the new evidence. If Keene recorded anything, why would he keep it in his attic? He asked. Why not give it to the police if he feared for his life? Maybe he didn't trust his department, Mara said. Maybe he kept everything because he didn't know who to trust. Briggs tapped a pen against his lip. Or maybe he did something he couldn't tell us about. Mara thought of the letters stamped in the files, Keene asking for protection. She thought of the gaps in reasoning 22 years ago. Corners cut, questions not asked. She thought of Adrian Shaw and the way he taught her to check what people wanted you to see, and then check what they didn't. That night, as Mara walked home from the precinct, she felt followed. Not immediately, nothing overt, but a prick behind her neck. The sensation of being detailed by a presence she hadn't invited. She slowed, angled down side streets, paused at the corner of an alley to pretend to fumble for keys. The footsteps matched her pace for a block before speeding up and disappearing. She called Briggs from the safety of a diner booth and told him what happened. Same as before? He asked. Yeah. She watched a couple arguing at the next table where the neon coffee sign hummed. I don't like being noticed. We'll pull patrols for you tonight. Stay inside. She hung up and ordered coffee she didn't drink. Whoever had left the tape wanted her to dig. Whoever had climbed out the hatch at the central station had known how to vanish. Whoever had followed her tonight was watching for patterns. She kept replaying the man's voice in the tape until the cadence became a map she could trace. You think I'd forget? The phrase lodged in places where memories made their own dangerous choices. It suggested a man who had once felt betrayed, who found a way to mark his revenge or confession with the recording. It suggested someone who wanted to be remembered. Mara knew what needed to happen. She needed to find the last people who saw Rebecca Collins alive. She needed to track Thomas Keene's movements in those final months before his death, and she needed to speak to the prosecutors and defense attorneys who pushed for the conviction. She needed to open an old wound and scrape at the infection until something bled and something clean emerged. But she also knew that in doing so, she would unnerve people who had built careers and lives on the story as it had been told. She would peel paint off reputations. She disturbed the peace of a city that preferred certain lies to certain kinds of truth. She drove alone to the apartment where Rebecca had lived, tucked between a pawn shop and a laundromat. The building was the same, a brick face with a sagging awning and a stairwell that smelled like lemon oil and old boots. Mara climbed to Rebecca's unit and pressed her ear to the door. Nothing moved. She knocked, more out of ritual than hope. The current tenant, a woman named Denise, answered cautiously. 40, hands rough with work. Mara showed her badge and spoke softly. This used to be Rebecca Collins' apartment. Did you
"Do you know anything about the night she was killed?" Denise's eyes slid past her to the hallway where a neighbor had paused. "I was 12 then, but my aunt lived downstairs. She said there was a scream. People talked, but no one saw a face. We thought it was burglars. Did anyone strange come around before that? Any men crying, any fights?" Denise thought, then shook her head. Rebecca kept to herself. "Nice kid. I remember she dated this grad student, always had stacks of books. He left town after that. Think his name was Ethan." Ethan. Mara typed the name into her phone, a mental pin on a map of suspects and witnesses. A grad student made sense. Someone who knew the rhythms of student life, someone who could slip in and out of apartments. But the tape had a man's voice that sounded practiced, older. Keene didn't seem to fit Ethan's age. She left with a new breadcrumb and a growing sense that, like an onion, the Collins case wanted to be peeled in layers. Each layer smelled worse than the one before, and each might reveal something that would ruin someone's life. Mara drove back to her car and kept replaying the tape in her head. The desperation, the anger, the cry. Thomas Keene's name hovered over everything like a blackbird. Whoever he had been, the man with the public image of a witness, he had kept secrets. Now someone had put those secrets where she would find them. Someone wanted her to remember. The morning broke with a thin gray light crawling over Ravenwood, but Mara barely noticed it. She had slept no more than an hour, her mind grinding through every scrap of evidence, every unanswered question, every breath on that tape. She poured coffee that tasted like rust and regret, then headed for the precinct with the box of Keene's tapes under her arm. Today, she would either uncover the truth or set off a chain reaction that would expose things the city buried long ago. Briggs met her in the hallway, holding a folder too thin to be good news. "We traced Ethan Rourke," he said, without greeting. "Rebecca's boyfriend back then. He's a professor now, teaches criminal psychology at the university." "Criminal psychology?" Mara repeated. "Convenient. He answered my call," Briggs continued, "and he's willing to talk." Mara didn't waste time. She drove to the university, weaving through morning traffic until the campus rose before her. Old stone buildings, thick oak trees, walkways slick with last night's rain. Students rushed past her, drenched in caffeine and rushing somewhere. She found Ethan's office in a narrow corridor. His door stood open. Ethan Rourke was in his 40s now, but he still carried the scholar's stiffness she remembered. He looked up from his desk, and his eyes widened when he saw her badge. "Detective Ellison," he said quietly. "I wondered if this day would come. You knew Rebecca," Mara said. He nodded, folding his hands. "She was bright, funny, driven. She deserved more than what happened to her. You left town right after her death." His jaw tightened. "A lot of people thought I was a suspect. The whispers, the looks. I was 2 exams away from dropping out. Rebecca's death broke something in me, and Ravenwood wasn't a city where grief went unnoticed. Every time I walked down the street, I felt watched, judged." "Did you know a man named Thomas Keene?" Mara asked. Ethan frowned. "Keene? The man who testified?" "Only from the news." "Why?" Mara studied his face. No flicker of recognition. No fear, just confusion layered with old sorrow. "Because new evidence suggests he may have been involved in Rebecca's death." Ethan's face blanched. "What kind of evidence?" "A recording." He sat up straighter. "Of the murder? Possibly." Ethan swallowed. "I want to help," he said, "but I don't know anything. Rebecca was working on a research project at the time. Something about patterns of behavior and community leadership. She never told me the details." "Leadership?" Mara echoed. "She was interviewing prominent people, teachers, business owners, politicians, anyone who interacted with the public. She said she'd found discrepancies, people lying about their backgrounds, hiding things. She was planning to publish something." Mara froze. Keene had been a community volunteer, a man with ties to various city programs. What if Rebecca had uncovered something about him, something that made her dangerous? "Do you know if she kept notes?" Mara asked. "Yes, a journal, spiral bound, green cover. She never went anywhere without it, and it had never been found." Mara left the university with the certainty that tightened around her ribs. Rebecca's death wasn't random. It had been personal or political or both. Imani called her an hour later. "Detective, I digitized the rest of the tapes.
You need to come hear this. Mara rushed to the lab. Imani had 3 tapes queued up on her computer. She clicked play. The first featured Keen humming nervously, his voice distinct, controlled, too composed. Then a second voice, calm, measured, practiced. A conversation, faint, but audible. Man, did she say anything? Keen, no, but she might. She saw the papers. Man, you're sure she didn't recognize you? Keen, I don't think so. Man, if she talks, we're finished. Keen's voice trembled. I can't do this. Man, you already did. Mara felt a chill slide down her spine. The second voice, she recognized the tone, the clipped consonants. The authority. No, it couldn't be. Replay that, Mara whispered. Imani did. The second voice was unmistakable now. A man of influence. A man with power in 2003. A man who had been in the courtroom the day of the trial. A man who was now running for Ravenwood mayor. Councilman Robert Hale. Mara felt her mouth dry. Hale had been a rising star even back then. A charismatic figure, involved in community initiatives, including the one Keen volunteered for. If Rebecca had uncovered something about Hale, a fabrication in his past, a fraudulent resume, a false identity, he might have felt cornered. He might have coerced Keen into helping him. Do we have recordings linking Hale directly to the murder? Mara asked. Not yet, Imani said. But listen to the next tape. She played tape 3. Keen, she was asking questions about you. Hale, she shouldn't have. Keen, I didn't know what to do. She kept pushing. Hale, you did what you had to. Then silence vibrated with unspoken violence. Then Hale again, quieter this time. Clean it up. We cannot afford a mistake. The tape cut. Mara sat back, her heart hammering. Hale had orchestrated something. He and Keen had been in this together, but Keen had been the one to approach Rebecca. Hale didn't dirty his hands. Not directly. Not then. Hale had motive. Hale had opportunity. Hale manipulated Keen. Suddenly, it all made sense. Keen's letter asking for protection, his paranoia, his sudden death 5 years ago, heart attack, alone, no investigation. Briggs needed to hear this. She didn't realize how right and how wrong she was. Briggs listened to the tapes with a stony face. When they ended, he leaned back, fingers interlaced on his stomach. This is bad, he said. This is very, very bad. Hale killed Rebecca. We don't know that. We know he was involved, but the man's running for mayor in 2 months. If we move too early without evidence tying him to the actual murder, we're handing him a political shield. Mara slammed her fist lightly on the desk. Briggs, he's dangerous. He killed Keen. Briggs didn't deny it. What's your next step? Mara opened her mouth, but she didn't get a chance to answer because the door opened and Robert Hale walked in. Tall, polished, charming smile that never reached his eyes. Briggs stood. Mara didn't. Detective Ellison, Hale said smoothly. I'd like a word. Mara noticed the way Briggs suddenly blocked her view of the tapes on the desk. Smart. Too smart. Did he already know Hale was coming? She couldn't tell. She stood slowly. Councilman, what do you need? He smiled pleasantly. I heard you've been revisiting an old case. The Collins case. Mara's jaw tightened. Public records are open to any citizen. True. But it looks very odd when a detective opens something that was resolved 22 years ago. I hope you're not trying to cause trouble where none exists. Mara held his stare. Are you concerned about trouble, Councilman? Not at all, Hale said warmly. But I would hate to see the department waste time on ghosts. He left it there, offered a thin smile, and walked out. When he was gone, Briggs exhaled shakily. He knows someone is pulling at threads. Let him know, Mara said coldly. He'll get sloppy. But Hale didn't get sloppy. He got desperate. That night, Mara's car was broken into. The tapes in the trunk were gone. Her apartment door had fresh scratches on the lock, and a note was left on her kitchen counter. You're in over your head. She burned with fury. Whoever was doing this had access, confidence, and audacity. Hale wouldn't break into her home personally, but he had people, loyalists,
shadow operators. Mara didn't call Briggs this time. She called someone else, a journalist. Her partner from years before Shah died, a young reporter named Leila Cortez, whose instincts for truth mirrored Mara's instincts for justice. She met in a parking garage where shadows hid more than faces. "You ready to ruin your career?" Leila asked. "I'm ready to save an innocent man," Mara replied. She gave Leila copies of the digitized tapes. "If something happens to me, publish everything." Leila nodded, expression grim. "Then nothing will happen to you." But Mara wasn't sure so soon.
2 days later, Mara received a call from Imani. "Detective, you need to come now." Mara rushed to the lab. Imani held up a printout. "I isolated the background noise on the tape again. The hinge creak, it's from a warehouse door. A specific one, old manufacturing plant on Booth Avenue, the one behind locker 314, Mara said. Imani nodded. "I think the murder happened there." Mara felt it before she understood it. A single location where everything converged. "You're not going alone," Briggs warned. "I have to," Mara insisted. "Mara, I can follow you from a distance, but you have to go in alone." He hated it, but he agreed. The warehouse on Booth Avenue loomed like a rusted giant. Mara stepped inside, flashlight pointed forward. Dust coated the floor. Footprints, fresh ones, cut through it. She followed them deeper into the structure, toward a back room where a flickering light glowed. A silhouette stood inside. "Detective Ellison," the voice said. Male, calm, too calm. She raised her weapon. "Show me your hands." The man stepped forward. It wasn't Hale. It was a face she had never seen. Mid-50s, gaunt, pale, eyes sunken but alert. "I'm the one who left the tapes," he said. "Keene was my brother." Mara's grip tightened. "Your name?" "Richard Keene." "You recorded the murder?" "No, my brother did. He kept everything. He was scared of Hale. He planned to turn it in one day, but Hale found out." "Hale killed your brother," Mara said. "And Rebecca. I couldn't protect either of them, but I could make sure someone saw the truth." "Why now?" Mara asked. "Because Hale is about to become mayor. If that happens, there will never be justice." Mara stepped closer. "If you have more evidence." A bullet punched through the metal wall behind her. Mara dove. Richard fell first, hit in the chest, collapsing instantly. Mara crawled behind a stack of crates as more shots rang out. She recognized the precision. Trained shooters. Hale's people. "Come out, detective. This isn't your fight," a voice called. Mara fired back, shattering the overhead lamp and plunging the room into darkness. Footsteps closed in. Mara slid across the floor, heart pounding, scanning for movement. She spotted a leg rounding a corner and fired. The man dropped. Another came at her from behind. She ducked under his arm, slammed her elbow into his ribs, and disarmed him with a swift takedown. The third man cornered her. Before she could react, a gunshot echoed. The man fell. Briggs stood behind him, gun smoking. "Told you you're not going alone." Mara didn't waste time. She ran to Richard Keene. His breathing was shallow, eyes fading. "Richard," she whispered, "do you have proof? Anything?" He lifted a weak hand and pointed to the back wall. "Behind panel." His hand dropped. Mara forced herself not to react. She found the panel and ripped it open, revealing a hidden compartment filled with documents. Journals, photos, tapes, everything Rebecca had uncovered, everything Hale had tried to destroy. Hale was arrested 3 days later. The tapes and documents shattered his campaign and his career. Evidence tied him to fraud, extortion, and the events leading to Rebecca's murder. Keene had been manipulated, threatened, used, and then silent. Nathaniel Price was released, stepping into the free air for the first time in 22 years. He cried. Mara did too, though she hid it well. Lila published the full story, crediting Mara only where necessary. Public outrage swallowed Hale's empire. Briggs insisted Mara take a week off. She didn't. Instead, she sat in an empty corner of the precinct, listening to the digitized version of the tape one last time, not to relive it, but to understand it. Rebecca's final scream no longer echoed as a mystery. It echoed as a promise kept. Mara closed her eyes and let the silence settle. Justice did not erase the past, but sometimes, if you were lucky, it could rewrite the ending. And Detective Mara Ellison had just rewritten one that had haunted Ravenwood for 22 long years.